back to basics. We're back to basics. We're back to basics. Back to basics. Let's get down to brass tacks and start rolling the dice. We need some practical facts, no more and theory crafting. Singing their own songs as you go live. There's nothing better. We're back to basics. Let's get down to brass tacks and start rolling the dice. We need some practical facts, no more theory crafting or lofty abstracts. I need a concrete solution, a foregone conclusion. Back to basics. We're back to basics. Greetings and welcome. We're back to basics. Okay, here we go. Greetings and welcome to Elder Goblin Games, the Universalist TTRPG channel where the DCs are made up and the stats don't matter. What's up, folks? It's me. It's your boy, Jorbin. What's going on out there in the wild world of TTRPGs? This is another live stream where I'm going to start off by chugging a bunch of water. That was a bunch. Let it be noted. Hey, what's going on? We already got some people in the chat. I see Indent Your Code and Torn. I'll call you by your Christian name here, Torn. What's going on, folks? Happy to have you here. This might be a short stream tonight. I'm feeling a little worn down by the week. It's been a long week of not a lot of childcare, and my wife's been working every night, which means solo dadness. Anyway, that's what's going on in my world. I want to talk to you tonight about a subject that Torn from the Discord brought up, and it is about pregens in your tabletop role-playing games. Hopefully my sound is on. Last time the sound didn't work. So let me know if you can't hear me. If you can, I'll keep going. So this was the premise. Why would you want to use pregens in your tabletop role-playing games? So let's talk about it. Let's go over the obvious first, right? They're faster. They let you get straight into the action. They're especially useful in organized play or short-form campaigns. We were talking today about the word campaign, so now I want to say stories or adventures. They can also sort of extend to your longer form campaigns if players choose to go with those pre-made or pre-gen characters. If you start off with like a shorter adventure, like I suggest in my most recent video where I talk about sort of my recommendations for different starter adventures. Why does it say my chat isn't working? Can you guys hear me out there? I just want to make sure I'm actually talking and not just... I'll turn up my volume for a sec. Okay. It seems like I am coming through, so I'm just going to keep going and assume that people are out there. Feel free to jump into the chat at any moment if you have questions, thoughts, concerns, that kind of stuff. So yeah, faster, straight into the action, especially in organized play, one-shots especially. And, you know, you always have the option to take them and either change those characters in ways that maybe the player has some creative ideas. But this is kind of getting into my second point here. Does using a pregen versus a, custom sort of character actually change anything? Now, there are going to be those players who are just, your unique snowflake kind of characters, which is totally fine. They want to build everything. The players want to build everything from scratch. They want to make a totally unique character. They have ideas already ahead of time for what that character is going to be. But, so herein we're already going to rub into one of our problems with custom characters, right? Sometimes people come to a game already prepared for who their character is in that world, and they might not even know what the world or the campaign is going to be about, right? So they have this idea for, like, I don't know, let's say this loner character who wields 2 scimitars and has a pet panther that follows him everywhere. Maybe he's this edgy sort of dark elf character and he doesn't really fit in with the rest of the surface dwellers, but they really want to play this outsider type character. And you're like, hey, you know what? This is going to be more like your classic Tolkien adventure where we're just a group of old friends who've worked together for a long time and we have a common goal that we want to do. We want to destroy this ring. We want to take it to Mordor and throw it into the fire. Well, your edgy dark elf ranger just might not fit quite in with this campaign. So pregens is another way to sort of say, like, these are the types of characters we're hoping to have in the game. Maybe choose one of these instead before you just go straight in. And once you get a feel for the campaign, you can change them up in any way you want to. We can even talk about changing class or race or something like that if you're not happy with who your character is. But this at least gets your foot in the door, gets the game started, gets everything moving along quickly before you even run into these sort of problems. Another thing is that there are only really so many archetypes of characters. You know, if you think of the sort of classic D&D, like fighter, wizard, thief, that sort of stuff, there are really, you know, a lot of times my mind goes back to video games. And I think about how all these games have sort of boiled down the archetypes of characters into 3 sort of modes, right? You have your, like, up-close fighter, we'll call him a tank. We'll use that terminology. You have your sort of support role or your healer kind of class. And then you have a specialist who usually deals damage in some kind of way or controls the battlefield, that sort of thing. So pregens can cover a lot of these classic archetypes, or even if you want to go even more specific into things like classes for, like, you know, let's use D&D as an example, right? You always have your barbarians, your wizards, your, you know, in later games, your artificers and things like that. And you can get even more into the niche of what those are and what archetypes mean to you. But it's likely that you can create a wide array of choices through those archetypes, and pretty much everybody can have an identity within their pregen character. And another thing is, pregens are a natural way to keep your players from stepping on each other's toes, right? Like, a lot of times when you have a party, people like to feel like they fill a unique role within that party. Well, pregens just already let you do that without having to even worry about, like, oh, we've got sort of 2 control wizards here, right? Like, now Matt over here is unhappy because Pat decided he also wanted to play a control wizard, and Matt was like, well, that was really going to be my thing, and I want to feel unique within the party. Pregens just keep you from having to worry about that problem whatsoever. There are, let's see here. Players are welcome to make small flavor changes, you know. That's another idea with these pregens. Just because it says one thing on your character sheet doesn't mean they can't write, maybe this is a female regular wood elf. I don't know what they're called anymore. Maybe this is a female wood elf instead of our dark elf ranger example. Or, you know, you can still fill in those sort of role play characteristics and things, or you could even tweak, like, I'm not really feeling like a double scimitar kind of character. Maybe I want to go with, like, a longbow. Maybe my ranger is more your typical strider and prefers to fight from a distance before just charging in with double scimitars. You know, twin steel, if you will. Shout out to Twin Steel from the Discord. So yeah, that's sort of one of the arguments against pregens, but I say those are easy changes and are not really, I think, a knock against pregens. Eliminate stepping on toes. We kind of went over that a little bit. Not just in the sense of the character, but also the roles of the players. Yeah, and I kind of went into that a little bit. But really, I think what I mean by this doesn't really change anything is that it's probably really similar to something your players would have picked anyway. Like I said before, there are really only so many choices under the sun, and I think a lot of them boil down into these classic archetypes. Like when we played a game recently that Torn ran in an ICRPG. Yeah, it was Index Card. And it was kind of a modified version, his modified version of these pregens. And there were already lots of archetypes to choose from, and they were really evocative, well thought out. And this is going to sort of bring me into my next point. A lot of times pregens actually add more than they take away. There are a lot of players out there that either don't know what they want to play, don't have a lot of experience in the fantasy realm, and so they don't have a lot of ideas or, unique creative energy to put into creating a new character. And it also, these games can be daunting if it's your first time ever playing an RPG. So pregens sort of just get this barrier out of the way for newer players. It's a lot easier to just look and say like, ooh, you know what, beekeeper, that sounds interesting. I don't really know what that means, but I'm going to guess that I'm not really like a fighter or a wizard. A beekeeper sounds like an interesting role that I'd like to fill. Hey, howdy, Sword and Stones, what's going on? So, pregens might provide you with evocative ideas, maybe even interesting art that helps get your wheels turning on who this character is, or they can even just create a jumping off point for newer players, right? So I think that in the end, pregens add more options than they actually take away. But I'll keep moving along. I think I said they get rid of a huge hurdle for a lot of newcomers. Options, here's one. Perhaps a pregen pushes you into a role that you don't normally pick or choose to play, but because they're already kind of set out and you can like look at them and you're like, you know what? I don't typically jump straight to cleric. That's not my go-to class. I'm more of like a fighter rogue kind of player. But you know what? Someone else is already playing the fighter and someone else is already playing the rogue or thief. I think I will take cleric this time. Ooh, this is a thunder cleric who uses lightning and calls down weather like Thor. That sounds pretty cool. You know what? Maybe I will try out cleric this time. Not usually my bag, but this is a cool looking pregen. I like the vibes. I like this artwork. This is super evocative. I'm going with that. So maybe that is one more reason you might try out pregens in your game. And here's another thing. It can actually create a sense of commitment for like a smaller arc or like a shorter campaign. So say you're playing a game that's like 3 or 4 sessions, right? And you've chosen to be that cleric. Well, guess what? If you don't show up, that party no longer has their cleric, and they're going to have to approach this game very differently. So it may even, in some roundabout way, cause players to commit more to a game that you're running by using pregens. Not only that, but if a character does die during the course of a game, like let's say that you're playing a character funnel, like something like a DCC or Shadow Dark, and you already have all these pregens ready to go. In DCC, you can even buy these like scratch-off pregen characters that are really fun. You just literally like take a coin and scratch off. You get to see their stats, what race they are, what class they are. You also find out things like what their birth sign is and their special ability, stuff like that. And there you go. Pregens are a good way to keep the momentum of your game without it grinding to a halt, because now you need to create a new character. So you can just grab another sheet, say, you know what, cleric's dead, but this wizard sounds pretty cool. Maybe I'll be able to buff the party and like do some control spells and keep everyone alive that way. We'll just grab a new pregen, keep things moving right into the action. And you guys out there, this is probably halfway through the video at this point. So what are your thoughts so far on pregens? Is there anything I'm not covering? Do you have any ideas about how you might do pregens differently, or reasons to use pregens in your games? Let me know. This is live, so I'll try to keep an eye on it. But oh man, somebody just kinder just spun up Elden Ring is making me jealous right now. I might have to play that game in a little while. So, let's talk about more reasons to play pregens. On the GM side of the screen is another one, right? So, having pregens, or these set characters that are ready to go for your session or your campaign, your game, kind of lets you as the GM know what to expect from the party. Know what you're getting into. It's a good way to gauge your party's power, their potential, what kind of abilities they're bringing to the game, and even like prepare things like monster fights, encounters in the future, or you might even know what sort of tools they have, right? Like if I put a puzzle in front of them where there's a chasm with no way of crossing it, but I didn't give anyone any sort of like flying, levitating, not even a rope and grapple, that might be a bad idea. This idea of pregens lets you sort of get ahead of what's going to happen or what comes at you in the game, and you get an idea of what your party is capable of, what they are lacking, what's going to be a challenge to them. Or, if it's a party full of Aarakocras and they can all fly, that chasm isn't even going to be a thought. It's not even going to be 10 seconds. They're just going to go, we fly. That was it. Cool. Why did you put that in there? So think about your pregens. Think about what you are handing to your players, because you are essentially handing them the tools to solve the puzzles and encounters in your adventure by giving them pre-written characters. And I'm saying pregens, but these are the ideas. They're pre-generated or pre-made characters. I hope that's clear. I think I do say that in the description, but I think pretty much everybody who's playing knows what a pregen is. Swords and Stone says, pregens are definitely a good thing to have. Our game is a bit chaos-driven and deadly, so I encourage players to create multiple PCs. Yeah, that's an excellent point. Yeah, like if you're playing a higher mortality rate game, lower life expectancy, something like a DCC, a Shadow Dark, even an OSE, if you're playing a little more brutally, then it's definitely important to have those backup characters ready to go. And pregens are a good way to do that. Or, even if you do something where you say like, hey, generate 5 characters instead of just one. And maybe your first one is one you create from scratch, but the other 4 just roll randomly. That's a good way to do it too. Maybe just check them over and make sure like that you as the GM know what your party's capable of, stuff like that. Torn says, I've discovered that you can build them to interact with the world. I have a barbarian pregen that's going to rip through one of the factions because of how they interact with his skills. Another option is inbuilt character relationships where they have extra power if a certain character is missing. Oh, that's a really cool idea. I like that a lot. I'll address your first statement first. You can build them to interact with the world. Barbarian that's going to rip through a faction. Yeah, because of the specific skills. Yeah, that's a really good point too. You can actually kind of like pick and choose and cater and decide, like, in a way, you can give someone a hammer, right? And there's going to be a nail situation. So you've given them the right tool for the job, and you know that when they get to that scene, they're really going to shine because of how you built the pregens. So this is a natural way to make a player feel empowered by having the tools they need for a certain situation. Or just, a really cool social moment, even if like you're saying with the relationship part. If they have an extra power, if a certain character is missing, that's a really cool idea too. I'm not sure I'm even quite wrapping my head around it in the moment, but like a bonded power, I guess, is kind of what you're going for. Where like, if your cleric isn't present, then you get this extra ability, maybe. Maybe we'll touch on that again, but kind of expand on that if you could, because that's really interesting to me. I've not encountered that personally, but I like the idea a lot. On the whole, it sounds really cool. Just to keep things moving, let's see. For the GM, we had know the party, know what you can throw at them. It's important too to know, like, I don't want to totally wipe this party right out of the gate with the first combat encounter they may come across. So knowing the power level of the party by being familiar and intimate with the abilities that those characters have could be pretty important to running, especially like a one shot or any sort of organized play. So pregens can be a barrier from like TPKing your whole party, right? Man, I have a lot of things. Windows security keeps popping up on my screen, covering up my notes. Place tools for problems in the party's hands. Kind of went over that, so I'll skip that. We kind of just naturally covered that. Don't get surprised by strange, mismatched characters, especially for organized play. Yeah, the idea that, like, it's kind of what we went over earlier with, like, I used Drizzt Duerden as the example, but, like, on the GM side of the screen, having pre-gen characters will keep you just from having weird situations come up, right? Like, you could have a situation where this player has this weird, zany, gimmicky idea of a character, and you're like, oh man, I just don't know if this is really going to fit with the Dark Souls vibe we're going for in this one shot, right? Like, you got Mr. Potato Head over here with swappable arms and like a buzzsaw hand, and it's just the weirdest alchemist artificer of a character in this like very classic dark gritty game that we're running. So pregens can be like a barrier from like one character feeling like their character is just mismatched with the party, or just pulling people out of it, like pulling people out of the fiction or the adventure that you're trying to run, and having this idea that it just doesn't really mesh well with the rest of the game or the party. Not that you want to like stifle people's creativity so much, but especially if this is like a shorter adventure or something like that, then it makes it easier than having to tell someone no later and shutting it down. This can just be a way to keep things copacetic, keep things moving along well. Speaking of moving along well, let's see, we have exactly the specific idea is that it can help to fill roles. If the cleric is gone, their best friend gains a minor healing ability. Yeah, I really like that. A lot of games don't have a natural built-in balance, so I think giving the option to sort of like offload a certain kind of ability and sort of fill like a half role. Man, this is reminding me of a video game I used to play where, like, if you didn't have one of the classes present, like a healer, then your like druid could be an off healer, right? They could just quick swap. Maybe it was like World of Warcraft or something, but I always really liked that idea that it's like you're not the dedicated healer, but in a pinch you can get the job done. So having that ability that could sort of like slot in the absence of a player, or if someone like cancels completely or drops out of the game or whatever, that's a really cool idea. I like that a lot, and that's easier to do with a pregen. If you already have an idea who that character is and stuff and what they can do. Pregens are good for last minute NPCs if you're not prepared for a certain situation. Okay, that's an interesting use I did not put on my run sheet here. NPCs, yeah, that is cool. I do end up using or reskinning a lot of like either characters I created and never got to play as a GM because I'm a forever GM and that's a thing, or older characters I had in campaigns who have retired because that campaign ended or whatever. So same thing with like a pregen. You could say like, what? There's another guy in this inn and he's sitting over in the corner and you see a holy symbol on his shield. You can guess by his look, the way he carries himself, that this, my friends, is the cleric you need. And now, you know what? Your party doesn't have to go into that adventure without a healer. So, boom. Slot in that pregen. That's a great idea, Swords and Stones. I really like that. That's a good one to add to the list. Let's see. Characters, I said that one. Get through more adventures with less character creation. I kind of went over that too. So I am at the end of my notes here, which means we're just going live now. This is all off the cuff. Which is a great reason to have pregens, right? You don't have to go off the cuff as much. You have something there sitting in front of you. If one of these things should go wrong, if something should fail, you have something concrete, some backup already ready to go. You don't have to flip pages on the fly in the moment. Create a character from scratch, that sort of thing. Um, oh, well, aw shucks, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a great idea. I really like that. That's cool. Especially, if they're already sitting behind your GM screen anyway. You're like, you know what? Um, I was gonna come up with a name on the spot, but that's like one of the things that I don't do. Uh, One of my so I talked about this in a different video. Always prepare the things you're not good at improving, and one of the things I'm not good at improving is character names. I always prepare those. Using pregens, backup characters, or the characters you make but never get to play can be great as hirelings. That's true. If you're playing sort of an OSR, an old school game, then you could definitely turn those pregens into hirelings. I would definitely scale back their sort of abilities and health if that's the case. But yeah, definitely a good point. Kind of along that line of NPCs, right? Like, or people you can either add to the party or use as like, background characters sort of things. Last minute decision to play a one shot. Okay, I have 4 pregens. Let's go. Exactly. You know, I ran a game of Shadow Dark for my wife, my in laws, and my parents, and I basically rolled up pregens for them because I knew I would only have about 2 hours worth of time to try to get them into role playing games. And I did not want them to spend an hour of that time rolling up characters. I knew I had this small window, this one sort of chance, this one opportunity, one shot to try and get them into role playing games, and I did not want to waste it going over rules, rolling dice, adding up numbers, things like that. I gave them 4 pregens, or not 4, I gave them each pregens and threw them into the action immediately. I said, you're at a door, a giant is chasing you into this dilapidated mansion. Boom. Your stuff you need is right in front of you. Your abilities are written on little bullet points. You're this class, you're this race. I gave them the nitty gritty, and I threw them in. Pregens are perfect for this. What's all this then? Distance from individual characters gives more room for engaging with the setting. That's a really cool idea I hadn't thought of. I like that a lot, actually. Yeah. There's also sort of certain games have an expectation, right? Like 5th edition, a lot of people go in really invested to this idea of their character, right? So if you have a pregen, it already sort of creates a natural separation if your character dies or something like that, especially if, in this particular example, if you have sort of new players playing an old school style game or something, this is a natural way to sort of divorce them from the habits of more modern type games. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but and to your point, it gives them more room to engage with the setting. So they're not so in their character's head, so to speak, or in the mindset of their character. They're now thinking about what's going on with the world they're in. They're maybe making different choices than if they'd really put a lot of thought into who their character is and focused inward on like portraying their character and that sort of thing, So that's a solid point. Can't rip. Thank you. But just my 30 minutes late take. No, I that is a really solid point I did not put on my sheet or think of. My brain hurts. I don't want to roll a PC. DM. Okay, fine. Here's a pregen. Yeah, perfect. You will have those players too who are just like, look, I'm kind of interested in this D&D thing or whatever, but I don't have a lot of time to roll up a character or whatever. I don't even know what any of this means. I don't know what a barbarian is from a wizard. Can you just do it for me? Yeah, here you go. Here's a pregen. I have a whole pile of them. If you don't end up liking this guy, try the rogue. He's totally different than the wizard or the fighter. He's got his own thing going on. He sneaks around. You know what? By the way, I keep forgetting to mention this when I'm on the live stream, but I am thinking of switching these to Twitch in the future. I've not had a ton of engagement on YouTube, and the chat delay is a lot worse on YouTube for some reason, and I would rather be able to bounce the ideas more quickly than have that sort of like 30 to 60-second delay or whatever it is on YouTube. So go check the description of this video, find my Twitch channel, and if you would, just click that and go sub while you're watching this. And then in the future, I'm going to try doing them over there. If they work out, I'll keep doing them over there. If there's less or no engagement, I'll probably bring it back to YouTube eventually, but I'm going to try it out for a little bit. So if you're watching now, go check that out, please. Thanks. Appreciate it. Pregens, at least the way I make them, let you make super wacky characters and not worry about classes or how they interact with progression. Yeah, that's a solid point, too. Especially if you're playing certain styles of games or editions of D&D. Like, if you're playing like a 3.0 or a 3.5, right? Like, the classic temptation is to sort of build that character all the way to level 20, right? And you're like, you know what? We might not even make it to level 20. I'm only planning to get to maybe level 10 in this campaign. And that just removes all that, right? Here's a pregen. Try it out. Play it for a bit. See if you enjoy it. Don't worry too much about what's ahead. Just have fun. Here are a couple of choices. Try one of these. Maybe you've never played this class or whatever. So, yeah, solid point. Super wacky characters. Yeah, that too. I mean, tonally, sometimes there's just a mismatch too. I talked about that a little bit earlier. But yeah, it does sort of eliminate that idea of like, we had a game. Sorry, Matt, I'm going to put you on blast for a second. Love you, dude. But we had a game that had initially, it started out as a more serious tone, and Matt brought essentially a Ninja Turtle to the party. It was a turtle monk, and let's just say, this is just maybe, I won't go too deep into this tangent, but this is maybe just one of my issues with like kitchen sink fantasy, right? I won't say this is just D&D, but like having all the options open all the time means that you're just going to have this motley crew of like turtle men and snake men and like, raccoon folk, and you're going to have the Guardians of the Galaxy every campaign. And while that's fine in certain campaigns, sometimes the tone is just a total mix match and doesn't make any sense. So, limiting pregens is a way of limiting your options without having to totally feel like the bad guy, right? Because, like, I didn't want to go, no, don't be. That character ended up being really fun, and I lightened up and I let the campaign just be. I realized, like, halfway through, if I'm going to play 5e, if that's going to be the system, then I just have to expect that everyone's going to play turtle men and stuff. And so I embraced the kitchen sink fantasy of it. But depending on the game you're playing, pregens can be a really good way to sort of set a tone and keep from like way too wacky characters that are way out there and don't make any sense with what you're doing. So yeah, that's another part of your point there, Whispering Wisp. But I think I've rambled about that part long enough. Let's see. Pregens, at least the way I make them, let you make super wacky characters and not worry about classes. Oh, I read that totally wrong. That was torn. Sorry, I read it backwards. Oh yeah, I definitely think that most character creation engines in many RPGs are an easy way to scare off most first-timers. Pregens are king for first-timers to see if they like role-playing games. Yeah, I went over that a bit earlier in the video too, but totally agree. There are a lot of barriers to playing role-playing games. One of them is coming in and having to create a character from scratch and it feeling like you're like starting a new subject in school that you've never understood before. It could be really daunting, I think. I even experienced that. I walked into my local friendly local game store to play Pathfinder Society. This was like one of the first times I'd ever played a role-playing game. And the guy sat me down and he's like, here's what you can do, here's what you can't do. We don't allow this, 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 and this. And, he was throwing out terms I didn't even know what they meant. And on top of all the other terminology, right? Like ACs, HPs, You get a lot thrown at you right away in a lot of role playing games, and pregens can just break down a lot of those barriers immediately. It's like, here, you know, write your name on it, whatever you think your character's name should be. Here's a couple of bullet point things they can do right out of the gate. You have a hammer, you're wearing armor. There you go. What would you do in this situation? That sort of thing. Sorry, I rambled so long that I lost where I was in the chat. Oh yeah, I definitely think that most characters are creation engines RPGs are easy to scare most folks. Okay, there we were. A good example is a character in the set I am currently building, where you play two smaller characters as a unit, kind of like ice climbers. Oh, that's cool. You know, something I haven't done a ton of outside of Dungeon Crawl Classics is allowing players to play as multiple characters. I'm starting to really come around to this idea, and it especially matches well, I think, with the idea of pregens. Because if you have these already sort of archetypal characters, or you know that it's going to fill a couple roles, or even, if you're playing one of those deadlier games like DCC, you don't have to worry too much if you do kill off a character or something. They've got backups. There are multiple characters they're working with, which means they're going to still have options and choices and things like that, and they're going to have fun. So pregens are another way to make sure that happens. But that's cool. Yeah, I really like that idea. The ice climbers, that's an evocative imagery. I'm a big Smash Brothers fan, so totally. We've already talked about this, but a cast of pregens will fix that Guardians of the Galaxy problem you get with a kitchen sink fantasy. Yeah, that too. And it can really solidify that idea of like, this is more the tone that we're going for. We can have like one or two weirdos out of six in the party, but if we're all six weirdos, we're all a bunch of Dragonborn walking in town and Snake Men, and it even says in the Dragonborn description, like, if you walk into town, people are going to stare at you. Well, at least it did in the original D&D 2024 Player's Handbook. I don't know if they changed that, but there was like a whole block section that was like, hey, if you're a Dragonborn, people are going to think you're a monster. They might even straight up attack you. So anyways, yeah, just that idea of like, I don't know how to say it other than a party full of freaks. I mean, I love it sometimes, but it can really like pull you out of it and break your immersion in a way, right? Watching from beginning. Yeah, pregens establish a normal baseline for where characters come from via show don't tell sort of. Give them multiple pregens each, and that's even stronger. Yeah, definitely agree. If a DM is assigning the party, you get a mechanical dynamic too. The lack of some characters' mechanics can really make a different game, like no wizards or all rogues. Oh man, that's something I've never done that I really, really like the idea of. Like the all wizard party, the all rogue group. It all rogue group immediately makes me think of like Blades in the Dark, but I've never done it in like a standard sort of fantasy role-playing game. And I think that could be like a really, really fun one-shot, like a bunch of rogues trying to infiltrate a faction and like steal the gem kind of a thing. Or even just like having a game where it's like, you're all rogues, you're all cutthroats, go wild. Let your murder hobo syndrome fly. This is the game to get it all out, That could be a really kind of fun idea. And, yeah, another good reason for some interesting pregens. The lack of something can be a feature instead of a bug. Yeah, I think you're still maybe going through the backlog of this video, but I definitely agree. Okay, dinner time. Gotta run. Good to see you, Swords and Stones. Till next time. They can even be specifically built such that the players can be well set up to interact with the individual cultures of their species or lineage. That's true. That's something that, Torn kind of mentioned that earlier when we were talking about like ways to have like a relational plug built into the pregen. That's a cool idea though. I didn't put that on my list, but I really like that. Ways, you could even, if you have like a specific style of adventure you're wanting to tell or story or campaign you're wanting to build, that could be a natural way to insert into the pregen some kind of attachment to the world that can help reveal parts of the story, parts of the history of the world, you know, a connection that could really unfold into something bigger within the story. Those are all really solid ideas for like a sort of like interesting thing to stick into a pregen and apply it to the rest of the game. Um, well, I reached the end of the chat here. I think more might come, but I think we've covered a lot of reasons you might use a pregen in your games. You know, like I said in the beginning, especially if you're doing any organized play whatsoever. Pregens are like the way to go if it's organized play. I know a lot of people like come to cons or whatever and they want to run their character they thought up and they brought from home, but you probably don't have time to go through their character sheet and make sure everything feels balanced to the party and stuff like that. You're wearing a lot of hats. You have a lot of spinning plates, whatever analogy you want to use when you're game mastering at a con or any sort of organized play at your local game store, stuff like that. Pregens are definitely the way to go. Or even online, you know, sometimes it's like everyone barely makes it into that Discord call 5 minutes before the game starts. You don't want to spend a ton of time trying to figure out what everyone's doing, what they're playing. You know, it can be really hard to like track those certain players down and get them to tell you what they're doing. So one last pitch for pregens before we wrap things up here. Yeah, I think tonight's going to be a short stream. I'm going to call it there. I've had kind of a busy week, I was saying earlier, and I wasn't sure if I was even going to go this long, to be honest, but, you know, we were having a good discussion. But, again, I will say, go follow me on Twitch. Check out the, you know, whatever it's called over there. Give me a sub, because I'm probably going to try to do more of the live streams over on that platform. I'm just discovering that YouTube doesn't really push live streams at all, I don't think, or at least not in my experience. I'm not having a lot of interaction with them. I'm definitely not being rewarded in any way for taking time to make live streams. I enjoy doing these, but I think just to make sure the interaction is more smooth, I want to do them on Twitch so that I can see the messages more quickly. Oh, sorry, I keep bumping my mic. So please follow me over there. Go check it out. I have a link in the description. And yeah, thank you guys for showing up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for interacting. These are really great tips. I love doing stuff like this too. I love these topical TTRPG videos because you guys think of stuff that I didn't think of that is really good. I mean, these are all great tips, and hopefully people will find this and watch it later, and they'll see that truly love your channel. Also, I hope all of your family and yours are doing better from the hurricane. Also, please let me know if you need any help and support. Thank you, Agile Monk. I really appreciate that. Yeah, we're doing all right. It's been a weird year. I've got a video coming out next week where I talk about it a bit more in detail. But yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Anyway, thanks for joining, everybody. Oh, thanks for the donation. That's awesome. Appreciate it. Cool. Wow. You didn't have to do that, but thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. Keep tuned for 7:30s on Thursday. I'm going to try it out on Twitch for a bit, see if it works. So, appreciate you guys. Join the Discord if you haven't. I really prefer to connect with people over Discord. YouTube is just not really a good space for like back and forth conversation. Notifications are all over the board. I don't even know when people like reply to stuff sometimes. Discord is just a good way to connect on a more community level, to have better conversations, to talk about game preferences, things like that. Yeah. I guess getting around is easier if you're agile. Someone has movement bonus. That's hilarious. Awesome. Well, thanks for tuning in, y'all. You know, I'm just gonna say my usual sign off because now I've run out of words and I'm stuttering. Like I said, long week. But as always, make mistakes, choose chaos, and most importantly, have fun. See ya.